Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting in public and online of Melton Borough Council. Item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any? None, I don't think. Minutes of the previous meeting. Is it your wish that these are a correct record? Yeah. You second that? I'll second that then. Yes. All those in favour? None against. Thank you. So we're now on to declarations of interest. Are there any members' interests to declare? No, none to declare. We now move on to item 4, which is the reports from Scrutiny Committee, and I invite the Chairman of Scrutiny, Councillor Mike Brown, to say whatever he wishes to say. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for giving me free rein, Leader. I'll just highlight some. I mean, the reports are in front of you, therefore I don't want to go through them line by line, obviously, but let's make sure it's a bit closer. I'll just highlight some bullet points which are of particular interest to the committee. I mean, in terms of the first item, which was the general fund revenue budget, I think it goes without saying we acknowledge the challenges that are being faced this year, as has been the case in the last few years, and there were no particular concerns expressed by Scrutiny over the budget proposals set before us, other than, and it's just to identify the obvious, we recognise the challenge over the further use of reserves this year, the unavoidable need to balance the budget by reference to reserves, and looking into the longer term, clearly that poses issues for us as a council, but I think that's understood by all, and it continues to be something that will be worked on going forward. There was a concern raised, and that's in relation to the MMDR South. Again, we understand the position, but just for the for the cameras, in a sense, we recognise the county council are not sending out particularly encouraging noises about when they feel they'd be in a position to progress, but it does remain part of our local plan and the commitment is still there. But again, we need to be alive to the challenges it poses in terms of delivering the local plan aspirations that we have. They were the only comments to make over the revenue budget. On capital, again, just two issues I just want to highlight. One is we did seek as a committee an assurance regarding the potential for escalating costs on the Stockyard project. I think we're all familiar, not least with the MMDR, I can mention it a second time, that you start off with a budget and for reasons out of our control, costs can escalate, but we did receive an assurance that the cost of that project would be maintained within the envelope set by the funding that's been allocated, and should costs rise, then it would be a question of re-engineering the project, not having to find additional monies out of the council's resources, and I think that was very reassuring to Scrutiny, and we should keep an eye on that, but I'm sure that will be the case. And then the only other thing under the capital item on the budget, and again, absolutely understand the position being adopted regarding the maintenance of assets, that it boils down to affordability rather than being able to do everything we would want to do in terms of the maintenance of the various assets we hold. But the point was made at the committee, and I'm going to reiterate it, that whilst that clearly is the position, we don't want to get into a situation that just by patching and mending, we end up with higher costs in due course. So there's got to be some reference to whether works have to be undertaken despite the budget constraints, because leaving it, things to fester could end up with a higher cost to the authority. But I'm sure the officers are, and I think it was clear from the responses we got, the officers understand that and will be on that. On the HRA budgets, the only thing I think I want to highlight, because I did ask a question about this, because there's a wonderfully large figure in the first year of the budget for energy efficiency, then a lot of zeros in the subsequent years. So we did seek clarification. that really is down to applying for funding, not that we'll have achieved total energy efficiency after that first year, or that we wouldn't aspire to continue doing work in our council-owned properties on energy efficiency. But at this point in time, it's impossible to put a figure in as to what we might be able to secure by way of funding. And that funding is external that's been achieved for that first year of the programme. So that was really there are other comments, as you'll see in the report, but they were just the ones I wanted to highlight from the budget. And then the other item that you have a report on is about the report on the Cleaner Green Melton. And again, there are a number of comments in the report. I just want to highlight three. One was we had a bit of a discussion about the important role that volunteers play, and they contribute hugely in this area of work, but recognising that volunteers we have today may not be here forever. And therefore the importance of having an impetus of recruitment and encouraging, and again, it's referenced in the report that is part of the thinking, and that is part of the approach that we're always looking for new volunteers and new ways of engaging people in this area. So that was welcomed. We welcomed the fact that there was a question asked about how we measure some of this work, and we welcome the fact that there is going to be work done on performance indicators, not just within our own employed workforce, but also with BIFA. So we'll have something to measure against, some sort of benchmarking. But we understand Ryan, the officer concerned, is currently working on that, and we'll be hearing more about it in due course. But it's important that we have something visible that we can check our progress on and our achievements. And then finally, there was a question raised about some of the routine works like grass cutting, etc., that take place, and the suggestion that it would be helpful to have a schedule that was available for members, actually, so that when we're getting queries from our residents, rather than having to constantly come back to office and say, when's this verge going to be cut, when's that hedge going to be trimmed, etc., we're actually in possession of a rough idea of what the schedule is, so that we can easily deal with residents. And it wouldn't be a bad idea for that to be publicly published, so that people in different parts of the borough can see when they can expect work to be undertaken. So those are the only things I want to highlight, but obviously I'm happy if members of the Cabinet who, having read the reports, want to ask questions about any other areas in them.
Thanks, Mike. I did attend the budget scrutiny meeting, as did several other members. I was listening intently and making notes, and we did reflect upon that before bringing papers forward here tonight. And as ever, thank you for a very thorough summing up, and for the reports that precede it. And I'm sure I don't like to use the phrase that you're pushing at an open door, because you don't know what's the other side. But I think everything that I've read and heard, it sort of harmonises with opinions we've got, particularly about those last few bits about knowing what's happening when and where, so that we can see what's happening and get a feel for if we're achieving what we need to achieve. I'll open it up to the floor to other members to ask questions or make comments. I'm going to stay for the next item, which will be very illuminating, I feel certain. So moving on to item 5, we have an unusual item tonight for us. It's a petition. Normally petitions go to full council, but they have to meet the minimum requirements in terms of numbers. I'm looking at the monitoring officer as I say that. Just a word of background. It sort of started for us before the last general election, and when I visited, partly because of me visiting Birchwood, when I picked up on the Changing Places programme, which is a national thing. There was a bit of a hiatus because of the election, and I think Margaret, you went up there with the mayor, didn't you, to visit? And we're very grateful to receive the petition. So would you like to come forward and sit there. Mike will show you which button to press, and the floor is yours to present your petitions. Say as little or as much as you want to, and then we'll respond formally.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me here today. My name's Hannah O'Mara, and I'm one of the assistant heads at Birchwood Special School. So last May, as part of our Profound and Multiple Learning Disabilities Awareness Day, we decided that we wanted to make a bigger impact on our local community and think about access issues for our young people. And one of the biggest access issues that we find when we're going out and about in the community is having fully accessible toileting. So these days, disabled toilets are called accessible toilets, so you can be forgiven for thinking that many toilets are fully accessible. However, we've found when we're out and about in the local community, we've really had to limit the amount of time that we can spend. We've had to limit the places that we can go to. And we haven't felt that our young people can necessarily be citizens, can be part of the local community. So we look to see how many changing places toilets there were. If you're not aware what a changing place is, it's essentially a large toilet space that accommodates a wheelchair and a carer, and it has a rise and fall changing bench, a hoist and a tracking system, a sink, and divides so that a carer is able to use a toilet whilst they are out and about with a young person or an adult even who has that need. There are two within Melton. One is at the Melton Carnegie Museum, and the other is at Melton Mencap Day Centre. So Melton Mencap really is used by service users, so it's not really logically, it's very difficult to get in there because you've got to sign in and DBS and protecting the people who are using that facility. Melton Carnegie Museum are brilliant and they are very welcoming to us. However, their opening hours are restricted. It's great for a school day, but for parents and carers outside of those times, it really restricts their access to the community. So as a school, we started this petition and it really gained a lot of momentum. It got a lot of support from the local community, and we have gathered over 1,000 signatures so far. What we would like is a changing place toilet that ideally is centrally located within Melton Mowbray, that is accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because the only way we can truly become, fully integrated into our society, have full inclusion, is to have access to basic fundamental human rights such as a toilet. I ask you to imagine what it would be like if there was only one toilet in Melton Mowbray that you could use. If you go to visit the theatre and you have to leave the theatre and walk to a museum to use the toilet, or if you're in a restaurant and you have to leave and again walk to a museum that probably won't be open because it would be outside of opening hours. So it's not just for our young people, it's for our families outside of school, and also for people who have conditions such as muscular dystrophy. It could be people who have suffered from a stroke. There are lots of people who require a hoist to be transferred onto a changing bench to meet their intimate care needs. So that's why I'm here today, and I'm really hoping that we'll be able to make some progress with this.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I'll open it up to my colleagues to say anything or to ask questions if they so wish.
I think it's a lovely idea. I really, really do. Is your idea to restrict the use to people who have radar keys? Only my concern might be that they could be misused, especially sort of at night time. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Most changing places toilets are on radar keys. However, we know that radar keys are quite easily accessible. You can buy them online. Most places that have changing places facilities have a second key, or they have a kind of Chubb style lock so that you use a second key to open it and it locks automatically when you go in. Because the thing with a radar key is if you lock the door once you're inside, if somebody else comes along with a radar key, they open the door and they're in. So it's not ideal. So if we were to say that there was a place where such a key could be kept, then that would be great. Obviously, if it's not possible for it to be accessible 24 hours a day, if it could be within maybe like restaurant opening times, if there's somewhere where that key could be kept so that you could go and get it, because obviously you'd be worried that it might be vandalised or misused. So absolutely, there would need to be some kind of protection of it and maintenance of it as well. It's really common for places where there are changing places toilets that people don't really understand how they work, or that the hoist needs to be charged. And quite often we will go to places as a school, we will plan out our journey, we'll get to a motorway service station and the hoist is dead because the last person hasn't replaced the handset. So we do need to educate people how to use it as well to make sure that it stays in top condition.
I'm glad that we've took this into consideration for the stockyard. Yes. You know, as on the plans as a hoist and everything. So I'm glad that that's been looked at already.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I'm really keen that as the designs develop for the stockyard, we can include you in that so you can see it. And maybe we also broaden it that change in space. I've seen a lot more press now about individuals with stoma bags and their inability to change somewhere, and that affects a much broader percentage of the community, doesn't it? And also some gentlemen, I've seen a football initiative where they actually require like a disposal bin for gentlemen that are undergoing treatment for prostate cancer, whilst they require pads and things that are often not facilitated for in toilets. So if we had one location that became almost like a well-known go-to for our communities that need them, that would be really beneficial. But thank you so much for raising it.
Yes, thank you, Hannah, for coming along today. I must admit, I really enjoyed that visit that we did at Christmas time. It was absolutely fabulous, and some of the photographs were really, really good. Yeah, I'm just a bit concerned about the opening hours, because our general toilets within the borough, in the town, are locked at 7 o'clock at night, I believe, or it's either 6 o'clock, I can't remember exactly. Is that I presume that's way too early for the sort of system that you're talking about, and I just wonder what the opening hours will be for the stockyard. It's something we perhaps need to look at going forward, because if we need them later, how are we going to actually get into the stockyard premises to go to the toilets as well? That's something that we need to address. Thank you.
No, absolutely. I mean, in an ideal world, it would be open beyond 7. I'd like to imagine that our families and other people can be out in the evening to be able to, you know, because we're talking about adults as well, aren't we? That you can go out for a meal and that you're able to access a toilet during the evening. It limits your participation in society if your hours that you can be out within the town are between the hours of like 9 in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening. So if there is a way that we can facilitate it being open into the evening, then that would be ideal.
Thank you. Clive, can I just ask you, do we have to physically receive the petition? We've received it by virtue of the speech, have we? No.
So it's just for an opportunity to present it and a bit of background rather than, as I say, rather than a physical requirement.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I'll wind up then the discussion, if I may. Mention's been made of the stock market, which received planning consent yesterday evening. Thank you, Alan. Very grateful for that. And the points about accessibility, because of when and for how long that area will be open to the public, is a key question that we've got to resolve. And all the comments made about the micro accessibility, keys and so on, we've got to work that through. This was very much a first start. As soon as I heard about it, I immediately said to the guys, can you incorporate this into our design? So they've done it. And I was speaking to the guys earlier today about it. And I made certain they had this in front of them so that we had the spec right from the day one. But we've got to move forward, and I hope we will do, because we need another location, really. I'm hoping to put pressure on the town estate to do their bit at the other end of the town, because this is a lovely town which attracts a lot of people, and we don't want to push out those with disabilities of this nature. We want to make it more welcoming, don't we, and dignified. So I do thank you for presenting the petition, and we will be looking forward to, doing better things in the future. Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to. You're very welcome to stay. Of course, you can leave. Yes, yes. Yeah, you're not being kept behind after school today. But thank you. Thank you. So, all right, boss. We've done all that, have we?
Yes, thank you.
I've never done a petition before, so that's a new one for me. Now, where's my agenda? I've lost my agenda. Have you pinched my agenda?
I haven't, no.
I had it in front of me a minute ago. Well, we're on to the next item anyway, which is item 6, is it?
Yes, Treasury Management Strategy.
Okay. I know we've all been through this several times already, but we ought to just hear from the officer concerned and the lead member anything they wish to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So yeah, we're over to the start of the budget papers for this year, which we have been through numerous times and with amendments. The first paper relates to Treasury Management and is perhaps the easiest of all the papers due to the good performance of our team. So I'm happy to propose the recommendations 2.1 to 2.4 in the report, and whilst it's quite a technical paper, the various indicators and supporting narrative continue to demonstrate how well the team managed the Council's finances in a prudent and measured way. They remain, thanks to the team, they remain top of their benchmarking group continually and have served us very well in terms of the returns they get. They show that how the cash flow that comes into the council is managed to good effect and how well they manage the investments they make on our behalf. And that has contributed to reducing the net cost of services all across the council. Interest rates have reduced this year and in fact today, and further reductions are forecast in the coming year. And therefore the team are going to have to look for opportunities to tie in as much of our investments as they can, obtaining those higher rates. The value of the property fund, which has been of concern to some members of full council, continues to improve and has provided a generous income for us over a number of years. With the likely removal of the current statutory override, meaning the loss, there is a notional loss on that account in terms of its value, has not had to be realised, and that's reassuring to see. However, due to the prudent management by the team, the council do hold a cashback reserve available to mitigate that should we ever need to realise that loss. And that's it on the paper. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to second that from the chair. Are there any other questions or comments on the paper? Then it's been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please show. None against. That's carried. Thank you very much. Move on to item 7. Over to you again, finance team.
Thank you. This is the larger of the papers and has been amended in relation to the final settlement that was received, which means we've now got the national insurance reimbursement incorporated into the paper. The council's finances remain extremely challenging, as evidenced with this being the largest strategic risk this council faces. And whilst the report refers to a forecast overspend of around 187,000 for the current financial year, the team have worked diligently to try and get that that overspend down. And in light of some recent large planning applications, that's likely now to be reduced, the overspend reduced to circa 50,000, which I think is significant, and we should thank the team for that. The provisional finance settlement sees the removal of the Rural Services Delivery Grant, and that is a disappointment for us as a borough community. and the inclusion of the locally raised council tax in the allocation of the funding floor. This has resulted in district councils receiving the lowest increase across the government sector in core spending power, and I was happy to support the Rural Council lobbying government to look at that again. We welcome the final settlement, which has provided clarity over the level of employers' national insurance compensation, and that's now been factored into the budget. It brings the shortfall down by just under 100,000 and reducing the demand that we need to place on our reserves. The budget proposals have taken into account the views expressed by the Scrutiny Committee, and I thank you for the feedback that we've received and your diligence in reviewing the budget. The modest growth that we've proposed enables investment in areas where we know there are challenges and investment is needed, such as planning enforcement. And that is of particular importance as the continual feedback we hear from the community is our town is growing and there is concern of those large-scale developments. So we are enabling that growth to be monitored to ensure that it doesn't affect residents that are already in the community. The second area of growth is environmental services, and this administration made a commitment to our green space and preserving its integrity and making it valued for our community. And lastly, the community support service that we've seen through UK SBF, which we know the cost of living crisis continues for many of our families, and that role has proved to be very essential, especially to our rural communities that it's servicing. The severe pressures on the budget due to rising demand and costs and the reduction in core funding, that means that once again we need to draw on the Council's reserve to balance the budget and to support non-recurring items of investment if we are to avoid a reduction in services. This is not ideal or sustainable, and I note that we're not the first administration to draw on reserves. It's been a number of years now, and that is why it's not a sustainable position. I, as portfolio holder, am particularly grateful to the advice of our Section 151 officer early in our administration to, in particular, use the business pool rates to bolster our reserves, and that advice has served us well because it means that we do have reserves to call upon from a very low point when we took over as an administration. There has never been such great uncertainty around local authority finances, with the funding review proposed for 26-27 and the uncertainty of costs and the level of funding available for the recycling reforms and introduction of food waste collection. Future forecasts indicate that the Council is at risk of fully utilising its unring-fenced reserves by the end of 27-28. This risk may become obsolete by the devolution and local government reorganisation, but until we have clarity, the Council must continue to have regard to its future financial sustainability, and it's a commitment that we as an administration made. We will continue to work on a robust and deliverable financial sustainability programme. And in this context, it's important we maintain our momentum on the asset development programme, as this will be key to maximising assets and achieving value for money with the potential for generating much needed revenue and capital resources. The proposed budget in respect of special expenses Melton Mowbray is another step forward in the fund becoming financially stable. However, the level of cemetery income as indicated by the current year's shortfall remains a risk. Once the fund is on surer footing, the level of working balance will need to be reviewed to de-risk future overspends. The cost attributed to Frisbee closed churchyard and the impact on local residents is acknowledged by us as an administration, and we have therefore proposed it be mitigated by spreading the burden over a 3-year period. Whilst it is a sizable increase to that community, it's unavoidable due to the urgent nature of the works required. I'm happy to support the proposals from recommendation 2.1 to 2.29. Thank you. Just to one addendum, we do have to do a business rate consultation in relation to the budget. We did so, and one consultation response was received, but it doesn't relate to the budget. It relates to one of our policies, which we'll address outside of the budget process.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks, Dawn, for all the work that the team's done on this. A Herculean task again, particularly when we get some of the data almost before the day that we need to consider the outcome. I'm happy to second the recommendations on block, but open the floor for any comments or questions. Sharon.
I've got two. Is one, the planning enforcement. Well, I think we agreed it was going to be compliance planning enforcement.
What page is that on? Is that
80.
80?
Yeah.
Page 10.
Oh, 80 on the
It-
first lot of papers.
So it's 10 on the new one.
Yeah.
On the new one, yeah. I've got the new one in front of me, not the old one. So can everyone see that? So it's just in the narrative, is it? Okay. We did say that. I
We did
remember
agree,
we did
yeah.
discuss that. There's no financial implication of changing that, is there? Yeah.
We can make that clear in a minute. and
Yeah.
make those
Yeah. Okay.
And the
Thank you.
second one is the homelessness costs were unable to be contained. That's obviously quite a big concern, isn't it? Because they keep spiralling.
So the council has received substantial additional funding in relation to homelessness for the next financial year. We are looking, as you're aware, as part of the asset development plan, at looking at utilisation of some empty premises that we have and conversion within the HRA fund. So I think a number of properties are being reviewed in that light, with a view to us all looking at how we can reduce homelessness costs for the borough going forward.
Add to that, I was at a meeting last Friday of council leaders from across the region, a lot of us, and that point was made about the impact of homelessness. And of course, the discussion has to be around what is the causes of the homelessness in the first place. But absolutely right, we can't go on putting people up in hotels. We need to have a more structured solution to this outside of this budget process. Margaret, did you want to?
It actually, just to come back on the point about sort of looking at some of our assets and changing the use of them. We have been talking about this for quite a while. And I do think it's sort of perhaps, I think it's imperative that we actually action now. I know we've got an awful lot to do and business as usual, etc. But this is important because the longer we leave it, the more we're going to have to pay out. So it's in our best interest to sort of cut to the chase now and actually start getting this done. And it's no criticism on anybody. It's just the fact that the way things have gone. But we need to address this now. And we've had lots of conversations, but now it's this year going forward should be the actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. The point that was made about the upcoming changes to local government was very apposite. I was in a meeting today with a government minister who made 2 points. One was that money must follow need, and that as we move into the new regime, whatever that regime that happens to be, it cannot be that some of the big spending functions of county councils, for example, with respect to social welfare, should impact on the services that districts and boroughs currently provide. So we can't have our sort of functions, whoever's looking after them, being drained of cash in order to fund other things. So there was a very clear commitment, and that I think we will see that as part of the funding review going forward. But we heard this week that we're not in the vanguard of change. We're sort of the next row back, as it were. So we've got time to get our ducks in a row. And one of the things I'm pleased to add to this discussion is that our relationship with the other 6 boroughs and districts is very good across the different parties, and we're all trying to work together so that as we move forward, we can harmonise these things, reserves, budgets, and so on. So we're sort of starting from a good place with some good colleagues. So that's helpful, I hope. Any other comments on this paper? Okay, well, we've moved and seconded it. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to the capital programme. Item 8.
Thank you, Leader. Over to me again, I think. I'm pleased to propose the recommendations in this report 2.1 to 2.25. It's disappointing in particular that the level of funding received from the previous government with regard to the food waste collection vehicles falls short of that required, and that shortfall will have to be met from councils. Extremely limited capital receipts despite assurances that the impact of these changes would be fully funded. This is leading to a forecast overspend on the current year's programme. We have and will continue to lobby the new government to make good this shortfall, and in the absence of any further funding forthcoming, look as far as possible to mitigate where we can reduce any overspend. Hence the delegation to officers to access the necessary funding to bridge the gap as required. Looking forward to the proposals for next year's programme, in addition to the continuation of existing approved projects such as the Luff-funded Stockyard project. There is a continuation of the street lighting improvement works, which I think we've seen around town, externally funded disabled facilities grants, and the business as usual replacement of our environmental maintenance vehicles. It is a modest capital programme. The capital element of the further year of UK SPF funding is also included in the proposals. The proposals are largely externally funded or use renewal and repair reserves, reflecting the limited availability that we have of capital funding. Also attached for approval is the corporate capital strategy as required to be submitted alongside our budget proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I called you Sharon, I mean Sarah, sorry. Yeah, beg your pardon. So I'll formally second the recommendations on the paper. Open it up to the floor for questions or comments. The only comment I would like to add is that we've talked in recent weeks increasingly about the significance of capital spend where there's sort of programmed works as opposed to revenue spend where you're sort of patching, and the difficulty that presents. You know, you can be a penny wise, pound foolish if you're not careful. And I think that members and certainly the general public, when they see what's happening, don't distinguish between capital and revenue. So I think going forward, it's something that we need to monitor a little bit better as a team and understand what's happening. And I know the officers are across this already. But I just wanted to make that point as something of significance for all of us, I think. So. No more comments? No? Okay, I'll go to the vote then. Those in favour of the recommendations, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. That's item 8 finished with. We're now on to item 9. Thank you, Sarah.
That's right. Last one. I'm pleased to support the proposals as set out in the amended report. So we have amended proposals in relation to this. So the recommendations are now 2.1 to 2.72 and relate to the HRA. As previously reported to Cabinet, there is an overspend for this financial year, which will be met by an increase to the transfer from the reserves to balance the budget and maintain the approved working balance. Government policy provides clear guidance on the level of rent increases, and proposals are in line with that policy. So that means for our tenants, it results in a 2.7% average increase. The capital programme is proposed is in line with the previously approved asset management plan, and the chart in paragraph 5.36 shows that over the life of the business plan, that whilst reserves are drawn on the early years, these increase in later years and across the term of the business plan. The reserves remain above minimum levels. Work continues to identify the funding needed for additional improvements such as energy works. And I think I'd just like to highlight how much we will be spending on our properties over the coming year, in that it's actually over £3 million, which I think shows a commitment by our administration to provide our tenants with decent housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I will formally move the recommendations, but in view of the fact that we've had the the additional recommendations, I'll ask Michelle if there's anything she wants to add as a gloss to explain that. Thank you.
Thank you. So the additional recommendations relate to a piece of work that has been undertaken following our regulatory judgment, just to make sure we can stabilise our staffing structure for the future. In doing that, we can make sure we maximise income, we can accelerate delivery of projects, and we can make sure we've got the regularisation of staffing resources in place that are needed. So the additional recommendations enable the Chief Executive to draw on a reserve to implement that structure, to stabilise what we have now and to continue that acceleration of progress, and then to build that into the base budget from the following year. So the timing of the structure review being undertaken is why it's come in as an amendment this evening. Thank you.
I'll open it up to the floor for questions or comments. Sharon.
I'm glad to see that from 2023 how much we've reduced the rent arrears. So that's really positive work from the officers. So I'd like to say thank you for that.
Thanks, Sharon. Anybody else? Okay.
Sorry, I think Sarah.
Sorry, Sarah, beg your pardon.
I was just going to note the same. I think it's been quite significant. And if we actually look in general, in terms of the fiscal management of the organisation, if we look at council tax payments, if we look at rent payments, they've all gone in the right direction in the last 2 years. And I want to thank the team for, through a really difficult financial period, you know, ensuring that our income is maximised.
And it's on top of everything else that's going on. It's not as if it's a small team in a little cupboard somewhere just doing that. They're doing a dozen and one other things at the same time. Margaret, sorry, did you want to make a comment?
Just say I totally agree with that, but thank you, everybody.
But plenty of work yet to do. Go on, Michelle.
Thank you. I just wanted to add some additional context. So we made a commitment as part of our HRA business plan to sign up to Housemark, which is a benchmarking provider. So we input a lot of our information to Housemark, including on our rent arrears and collection figures. And they've identified that this council was the best improver across the whole sector in terms of rent arrears performance. So I think that again just shows the significance of that change and improvement made. And again, referring to the additional recommendations before you this evening, regularising that capacity around being able to maximise income collection, not just for rents, but garages and scooter pods and other things that we do, again, forms part of that. So it's a really important thing to be able to continue to focus on and invest in, because it is making a difference.
And looking forward to local government reform, our neighbours who we are likely to merge with have council housing stock as well and similar problems. So we're not going to be finding ourselves out on a limb. But we should also add a word of caution about not being complacent. We've got lots of little things to deal with. We've got residents, citizens in our community who are elderly and in supported accommodation, where there remain practical issues which we will continue to attend to. So that's, you know, we've done very well up to now so far, but we've got to keep going, and that's it's not going to get easier. It will be quite hard, but we are determined to keep going on that, and we'll get the results that we need to get. So no further comments, questions. Okay, just to remind ourselves that we've moved all of the recommendations on the main paper, which go down to 2.6, and also the additions at 2.7 and 2.7.1 and 2.7.2 as circulated. So if we're all happy, all those in favour, please show. Thank you, that's passed. That's good. That's item 9 done. Local development updates. Is that you, Margaret? Has to be me. I knew you'd get in somewhere. Over to you. And
yeah, thank you. I think we'll sort of give Sarah a rest I've left my notes at home, so I'm a bit sort of ad-libbing it a little bit tonight. Yes, the local development scheme update sets out revised timetable for the Melton local plan update and indicative timescales for the future new local plan. As you're aware, the local plan review is an intensive piece of work. The local plan working group meet on a regular basis, and we've had to review several policies and obviously sort of amalgamate some policies together and generally take some policies out. So it's been an intensive journey. The local plan update is currently in the final stage of the statutory public consultation, and we anticipate it will go well, but it will not be adopted and probably until January 2027. As I've said, it's been a long journey, but not as long as the original local plan, but nevertheless an intensive package of new and revised policies. Just like to draw your attention to the item at 4.7, which identifies the local plan scheme update important timetable. You might find that quite interesting if you want to sort of know what's been going on with the local plan. But I'd just like to personally thank all the local plan officers and the members of the local plan working group who have been tireless in their quest to get to this stage in the review. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Margaret, and thank you to you and as well for championing this. As ever with all these policy documents, the devil's always in the detail, and some of us always have queries about things, but we will continue. But the broad thrust is really good. It's one of these huge tasks that has to be undertaken, and interestingly enough, it's going to be an interesting question as to how the various local plans are dovetailed together as we go into reorganisation. But people are thinking about this as I speak. Yes, please.
Sorry, in my haste to finish, I forgot to sort of include the recommendations at 2.1 and 2.2, so I'm happy to propose that.
And I'm happy to second it. Any question? Anyone dare ask Margaret any questions?
Just to note that it is a statutory duty, and that's why it's come to you this evening. So we received notification from government that the local development scheme that's before you this evening has to be submitted by the 6th of March. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, a warning that it's a statutory requirement. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. So that's carried. Now, for the next item, there are some pages at the back which are part 2 confidential, so please don't refer to them unless, or tell me that you want to refer to them, and then we'd have to go into private session. I'm looking at Clive to keep me on my toes on that one. So okay, so this is over to Sarah and Dawn again, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody likes to write off bad debts. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to write off debts over the value of £5,000 where there is little or no prospect of recovering them. I'm satisfied that the team have explored all opportunities to recover these debts. The report explains the background to collecting debts and the steps taken to collect them, which is in line with the Council's approved corporate debt policy, whilst having regard to a customer's individual circumstances. The policy also acknowledges there are some circumstances where it may be necessary to write off a debt, such as the debtor is bankrupt or a small debt is uneconomical to collect. The total debt being considered for write-off is shown in 5.3 of the report and covers council tax, rents and business rates. The individual debts considered for write-off are detailed in the exempt appendices. Paragraph 5.4 details the total amount written off since 2019-20, both by members and under delegation. This year, the debt was written off is not necessarily the year that the debt relates to. Of course, it's always disappointing to write off debts, but it's worth reflecting on the debt recovery performance of the team. So when we compare ourselves to other Leicestershire authorities, our performance in relation to council tax collection is that the team are first out of the 9 councils for 24-25, with collection as of the collection rates at the 31st of December 2024, and they really should be commended for that. When comparing to other Leicestershire authorities, our performance in relation to business rates collection is first, again, out of the 9 councils as of the 31st of December 2024. And in terms of former tenant arrears, as for the end of quarter 3 compared to the last previous 3 years, we've the figures are that we've reduced arrears from £339,395 to now £255,663, and the team continue to pursue some of those debts. So in terms of debt collection, the team really have gone over and above and continue to maximise the income we receive. So I therefore am quite happy to propose the recommendations at 2.1 and 2.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll formally second the recommendation. I've got one question of my own. At 5.3, the table with respect to council tax and business rates. Now, we of course are a collecting agency for other agencies, let's say the county council. So the obvious question is that when we write off these debts, do we, as a borough council, cop for that, or is that spread back over the other receivers of the tax?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's distributed in proportion to the elements, so it goes through what's called the collection fund, and everyone bears their share.
I think possibly it would be helpful to know what the net value of that writing off is on this council. That would be quite helpful, because that shows us slightly better, if I can put it that way, doesn't it? Not immediately, but I think that would be helpful to know, because I think it's this sort of information that we need to get across to the public, that actually we're doing quite well, in fact better than quite well. And congratulations to Dawn and the team. So any other questions? Yes, Sharon.
Some of the residents ones are quite high. With the rent arrears, we stepped in earlier and gave them help and, you know, to recover the money quicker, so like the amount, so it didn't escalate too high. Are we doing anything the same for the rates?
Yeah, so that's generally the aim. So we try to get people back on track as soon as we can, and if we feel people need more holistic, rounded support, then we would refer them into Me and My Learning.
Yeah, it's just that they seem quite high figures to have let get up to that stage. That's all my concern.
For the individual?
Yeah, for the individual people.
Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, in relation to rent arrears, some of these are quite aged debts. So please remember that the housing team, we also have the community hub, and that engagement with residents that are in financial difficulty takes place much earlier now, which is why we're seeing, you know, the actual rent collection going up much higher. I think the team intervene after a week or so, you know, to support people to make some payment and to keep the debt down.
So that represents a past peak, as it were, and we're moving forward. We've learnt from the past, and we're improving the situation, and we'll continue to do so moving forward.
The director's just highlighted to me that, you know, for quarter 3, as example, from 24-25, our collection rate was 99.55% for rent, which is significant. That's a real testament to the team.
It's almost perfect, isn't it, really? Okay. Any other questions? Or yes, please, Pat.
Just to say, I mean, some people we know are feckless, aren't they? But most aren't. And I think there are lots of sad stories here, you know, and anything we can do to help, I think we should do. And it's such a shame as well to see businesses go out of business. companies that we've known for a long time and they've been successful here. And it's such a shame for everybody when that happens.
3 more. That's very true. Anybody else? Okay. Well, we can move to the vote then. Those in favour of the recommendations as printed, please show. That's carried. So that's, I think that's the end of the meeting, is it, Chief Executive? Thank you all very much.